The Zalthor cubs huddled in the shadow of the cargo bay, their crystalline scales dimmed with fear. They had been aboard the human vessel for 3 cycles now, rescued from the debris of their colony ship after the Kreshner attack. Their parents were gone. Their world was ash. Katniss found them on her evening rounds, tucked behind a stack of supply crates. She stopped keeping her distance. The cubs, there were 5 of them, no larger than house cats, watched her with eyes that reflected the dim corridor lights like shattered mirrors. "Hey there," she said softly, crouching low. "It's okay. You're safe here." The largest cub hissed, a sound like wind through broken glass. Its siblings pressed closer together, their scales rippling with distress colors. Deep purples and grays that the translation database said meant terror. Katniss didn't move closer. She'd read the xenobiology reports. The Zalthor were a proud species, reptilian in appearance but warm-blooded. Their culture built on concepts of honor and self-reliance that made accepting help nearly impossible. These cubs had watched their people die. They'd been pulled from wreckage by aliens who probably looked like monsters to them. She was just another monster. The ship's heating system kicked on with a mechanical groan, and Katniss noticed the cubs shivering. The cargo bay ran cold, efficient for storage, terrible for frightened children. She pulled the thermal blanket from around her shoulders, the one she'd been wearing against the perpetual chill of night shift. "You need this more than I do," she said, laying it on the floor between them. The blanket was worn soft from years of use, a patchwork of gray fabric that had kept her warm through countless watches. The cubs recoiled as if she'd thrown a weapon. Katniss stood slowly, keeping her movements careful and unthreatening. "I'll leave it here. Use it if you want." She backed away, her boots quiet on the metal deck, and disappeared around the corner. From the shadows, she watched. For long minutes, the cubs didn't move. Then the smallest one, its scales barely developed, still soft with youth, crept forward. It touched the blanket with one delicate claw, then jerked back. When nothing happened, it ventured closer, pressing its snout against the fabric. The others watched, alert for danger. The small cub made a sound, a soft trill that Katniss's translator interpreted as warm. It circled the blanket once, twice, then crawled beneath it. Within moments, its siblings followed, burrowing under the gray fabric until only the tips of their tails remained visible. Katniss smiled and headed back to her rounds. The next evening, she found the blanket in the corridor outside the cargo bay, folded as well as small claws could manage. The cubs were back in their hiding spot, watching her with slightly less fear in their crystalline eyes. She picked up the blanket and carried it with her. This pattern continued for days. Each night, Katniss would leave the blanket near the cubs. Each morning, they would return it, dragging it through the corridors with determined dignity. They would not accept charity. They would not be in debt to this strange, soft-skinned creature, but they were cold, and they were children. On the 7th night, Katniss tried something different. She sat down against the wall near their hiding place, wrapped in her blanket, and began to read aloud from her datapad. She chose an old Earth story, one about courage and survival and finding family in unexpected places. The cubs listened, their scales slowly shifting to softer colors. Halfway through the story, Katniss felt herself nodding off. The blanket slipped from her shoulders and pooled on the deck. She didn't wake as the cubs emerged, cautious but curious. The largest one sniffed at her hand. The smallest tugged gently at the blanket. They could have taken it without her knowing. Could have preserved their pride by stealing what they needed. Instead, they dragged the blanket back to their hiding place and slept beneath it together, their small bodies forming a pile of slowly warming scales and soft breathing. When Katniss woke an hour later, stiff and cold, she saw them there. Saw how they'd positioned themselves so she could see them. A silent acknowledgement that they trusted her enough to let down their guard. She pulled her jacket tighter and finished her watch without disturbing them. By the time they reached the Zalthor refugee station 2 weeks later, the cubs no longer returned the blanket each morning. They kept it in their hiding place, and when Katniss came by, they would peek out from beneath it, scales now showing traces of blue and gold, the colors of contentment and trust. The smallest one even trilled at her sometimes, a greeting that needed no translation. On the day of their departure, as the cubs prepared to transfer to a ship of their own people, the largest approached Katniss. It carried the blanket in its jaws, and for a moment she thought they were returning it one final time. Instead, it placed the folded fabric at her feet and touched it once with its snout. Then it touched her hand, scales warm and smooth before turning to join its siblings. The gesture needed no translation. The Zalthor might not accept charity, but they understood gifts between friends. Katniss picked up the blanket, watching as the cubs boarded the transport. They looked back once, all 5 of them, their scales bright with new hope. She waved until they disappeared from sight, the blanket warm in her arms, carrying the scent of 5 small survivors who had learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of healing. And somewhere in the cold vastness of space, humanity had made 5 more friends, one warm night at a time.